right now. Let's see here. Who have I got over here? Oh my goodness, there's hands and there's all sorts of stuff in here. I see some people over in the New Pragmatic channel. We are ready to get this started. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. Thank you so much for joining me. It's Wednesday night, so it must be time for the weekly workshop. We do this every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Central. So if you're watching the recorded version of this, just know that if you hop into the New Pragmatic Discord channel, you can join the live stream and chat back and forth with me as we go through new topics each week. And this week is a pretty interesting one. It's one that I've been patiently waiting to appear for the better part of 2019, and it is Figma's auto layout feature. Figma is no secret to anybody who's familiar with the program. Figma is our preferred tool of choice for a variety of reasons, and it just keeps getting better. Figma also has a whole conference coming up in February, so if you're in the San Francisco area, you can obviously attend that, or you can also join the live stream, which was what I will likely be doing here as I'm based in Chicago. But the auto layout feature is a uniquely powerful way to begin working with real content in a component-driven design. And what I mean by that is, typically speaking, prior to auto layout, we didn't have the ability to make truly flexible forms of truly flexible components. And what I'm going to do is tonight we're going to walk through a couple of examples, and I'm also going to kind of show you some of the differences in the interface, because this auto layout has been added to Figma. So obviously, if it's been added to it, there is a fair amount of change that has occurred along the way. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get this underway. And where we're starting at, if I can go ahead and shut off my toolkit here for Figma, is I have this prototype that is basically it's a shoe store prototype, and the whole point of this is to give us some content, give us a structure that we're familiar with, that auto layout can immediately impact. Now, I have not went through all the trouble of making components out of this information, but I do think it's very interesting to start at the most atomic level, which is basically a text box. So to see basically how this can be utilized, I'm going to start by just coming off the side of this frame, and if I can get my tools back, there we go. I'm just going to start off the side of this frame, and I'm just going to select the text tool, and simply by typing in, I'll just type in test. All right, so test is the phrase that we're focusing on. It has a style of product title. I'm going to go ahead and break that away because I don't necessarily need it to be that large. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this in terms of auto layout. And when you have this as a text box, there is no clear way to initiate and call auto layout onto this element. What we have to do is we have to add auto layout, which could be done with Shift A. And I want you to pay close attention to the right rail. There's going to be an amount of change that happens pretty immediately. We'll hit auto layout, and now we have this new auto layout panel that has appeared. And so that we can really see what's going on, with this, I want to copy this frame over, and I'm going to pull auto layout off of. I'm going to pull auto layout off of this. So I'm going to delete that away. Here's our original, and here's our new one. And you'll notice that it now says frame 21. That doesn't mean anything to you or me, but frame 21, if we add a fill to that, you can see that the difference right away, and I don't want that. The difference right away is that we now have basically padding around that text element. This is beginning to function much like you would anticipate a element inside of HTML and CSS to function. We do have a horizontal padding and vertical padding. There is no direct concept of margin. Margin, you can kind of get to that in other ways, but when we look at this and we begin to work with 20 pixels and 20 or 50, you begin to see that these elements are pretty flexible. What's also interesting is they are responsive to the content that is input into them, and that is something that is really different by comparison with the way that buttons were created prior to this. So I want to take for a second and let's look at this. Typically speaking, if I was creating this button a couple of weeks ago, I would probably come through and I'd create my button size, and then I would marry this up same size, and then I would use these tools to center up my spacing like that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'd probably group it, and that would be fine. But what happens when I change this to restaurant is it doesn't naturally expand. I have to come through and then manually expand, and of course I have to go back and get both of those items and manually expand it, and it's a bit tedious. It's just a bit tedious, and it frankly only gets worse when you have multiple items side by side by side. So now if I said this one is restaurant, if this is show and this is tickets, we now have all this really odd spacing to deal with, and nothing is quite as efficient as it could be. If we did the same thing over here with test, and we piled these side by side, I'm going to move this frame around a bit so we have some room to work with. So let's do test. Put those side by side, and we'll do this test as well. And now let's put restaurant in there. And you'll notice right away that while this adjusted itself, the others next to it did not. And that's because we haven't properly nested this. So I'm going to back up for a second, and I'm going to now highlight all three of these, and I will add auto layout to them. And this is where auto layout really begins to become more like Flexbox. And you'll notice that auto layout has two controls here. It has a horizontal orientation and a vertical orientation. And right away, it doesn't take much work at all for these orientations to begin moving around. Even more powerful is the fact that when I come in, I type into the second one, tickets, it automatically adjusted the other items around it. And that's something that we weren't able to do prior to just a short while ago. Additionally, if we want it to, we can nest items upon items upon items upon items. And the easiest way for me to show you this in action is just to come down here. This entire panel here, which is saved right as right rail, and I've got a couple of copies of right rail, so I want to close this copy of right rail, and I want to come back over here to the one that's actually in the frame, and we're going to call this mock-up. So here's right rail. Right rail, if you really look at this, is just one nested component inside of itself. Everything's using auto layout. The important thing to realize with this right rail is this is oriented vertically. If I went horizontal with it, it's probably going to bust, and it did something weird. Like now right rail is going off the screen and into all sorts of different directions, and we don't necessarily want that. We want this going vertically. Not only do we want this going vertically, but we want to insert the shoe name here. In the old way of doing this, I would have to go through and kind of ungroup and move things around so that this I could include Nike Air Zoom Pegasus 36 Shield. I have a very small space here for the shoe name. But here, if I add Nike Air Zoom Pegasus, you can see it right away, 36 Shield, and I could even come in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to bust that away, and I'm going to make that 120. Or I'll make it 100 instead. Right away, we get a better sense of what auto layout is all about. If I came down and I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to edit this to be shorter. Now that one didn't adjust. Why not? Well, if I go in and look at the shape, it has a fixed size on it. So if I set it grow vertically, it automatically collapses down because it's being dictated by the amount of information that's inside of it. I do need to check one thing though. So we're going to take a momentary pause because CouchBot has not fired into the new Pragmatic channel, and I need to make sure that YouTube is functioning, because it appears that this recording is not occurring at this point in time. So we are taking a momentary brief break, and it does say that the live stream is working. I'm not really sure why or how that hasn't posted. But I will. You are live. Thanks, Fonzo. I didn't see it post. I'll edit this little clip out in a bit, but I did not see it post inside of the chat. So like CouchBot was messing with me there, and I wanted to make sure that that was coming across. It's really weird that CouchBot has not fired at this moment, but I do appreciate you letting me know that you were able to see it. I saw it says a couple of people are watching, so I know somebody's watching this, and I figure it was probably Matal and yourself. But I was worried that because it was not posting to the Discord channel, which it always does. It always posts it's like clockwork. So something must be broken with CouchBot. So I do apologize for that. But let's get back into this, because this is nerdy cool stuff. I've shown you how we can go through and edit this information, and the design naturally grows or collapses with the information that's in here. What's also just super cool is if as you're working through this, you determine that the the design isn't working for you, maybe you need to move some things around. Let's say, for instance, the thing that you decide that you want to move around is the let's take this bit of information down here. It says that you have the description. All right, I'm going to move this up, and automatically it moves everything around. If I wanted to move the add to, if I wanted to move the reviews up with it, I could. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, if I wanted to move all this information at the top down, I could. And the point is, if you've used auto layout to nest these elements together, it will allow you to drag and drop elements in a way that makes it much easier to be experimental with real information. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to back this up so we can get back to the original design we had. I want to take a second to show you how this is constructed. So, these are the two versions that we have side by side. This is a copy of Right Rail, which is right there. I have a few different nested items in here. So first of all, I have the top element, which has one nested item, category price. And then we have just the shoe name is in here. And then we have these three shoes. And these shoes, you can see if I wanted to switch them to vertical, I could. And notice that just everything around it reorients. Or I could switch them to horizontal, which is the original orientation. I have not made this. I've basically grouped this element because I have a very specific shape. I want it to go edge to edge. What I have noticed when I have multiple boxes side by side is that they tend to want to bounce outside of the boundaries. And by boundary, what I mean is I have this in a frame. And I'm going to go back to where we can see the entire frame. So this is in a frame called mockup. If I add my grid, and I'm using a very specific 12-column grid, I want that to line up. And what I've noticed is that when I have a series of boxes together, and you know what, the best way to show you is just to show you. I'm going to come on down here. I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to ungroup it so we get these items together. So here's the items, and you would think that I could probably go through and just auto layout this, but I'm going to grab these these five, and then I'm going to click auto layout. I'm just going to add auto layout to it, and you'll notice it moved. This time it moved in. Other times it's moved out. It's not consistent when I use a series of boxes together. So because of that issue, and I am going to reach out and ask Figma specifically about it, because of that issue, what I've done is I've just gone ahead and drawn that as a complete set of boxes and just grouped it and then thrown it in there as one element. And essentially what happens is when you move this around, you see that actually, let me zoom in so you can see it a little closer. So when we move this around and I move down, you should notice that there's like a dark blue line or a heavy blue line that appears. Everywhere that I can place this that is different than where it currently is, that blue line will appear. So I could put it right there if I wanted to. I don't necessarily want to put it there, so I'm going to undo that. But that blue line, like here we have the cart and favorite, everywhere that I can place it, that blue line should appear. So it's appearing there. It's appearing there. There, you get the idea. So that's basically how, we've looked at this a couple of different ways. One, the horizontal orientation, just creating a text box and entering in some text and allowing that to space itself out. One of the questions I've had from people is related to, do these things have to be side by side? And that's a great question, because just a moment ago we had these, and I'm going to orient these to where they have even spacing. And now I'm going to group them in auto layout. And now I will say restaurant. And you can see that even though these things aren't right next to each other, it's taking into account the space that was there before and then moving things appropriately down the page. The other thing that I wanted to focus on was we have the ability to shift the orientation of these items. So if I wanted to move these boxes over, the boxes with the shoes, I could center it. I could move it right. I could move it left. I can move it up. I can move it down. This is all very similar to Flexbox. So if you have any experience with Flexbox, these controls, the line left, move down, move up, these are all very familiar, similar to Flexbox. What's missing here, and I'm hoping that it gets added in at some point, is the ability to, instead of using just padding, I really wish that I could get in here and add not just vertical padding or vertical margin, but also I wish that I could add just top or just bottom or just left or just right, because when you have the ability to do that, then you really are beginning to unlock and make this more and more like what I expect from HTML and CSS. Additionally, so let's take this frame, this group here for a second. If I actually we'll take this. If I added a stroke, that stroke is going all the way around, and there's nothing that I can do to say, if I wanted a 10-point stroke below, what I actually have to do is I have to group it like this. I cannot make this into a Flexbox shape or not a Flexbox, but an auto layout shape by itself, because I have to take the line work into account separately, and that's just unfortunate. So there's some limitations to it, but overall, when it comes time to actually design with this and work with it as a component, work with it as a nested group of elements like we're doing here, you can do some really complex work with it, and put in, you can work with longer bits of information, and it reorients itself, and that's in my opinion the real power of it. We've got some time here, and I don't want to ramble all night long just on auto layout. I am going to be doing a detailed video going through some of the more finer points of auto layout soon, but I definitely wanted to have this evening workshop for you as a new Pragmatic fan of the program. Does anybody have any questions? You can feel free to jump into the general channel and ask away. But really, that's all I've got for you this week. Like I said, auto layout came out last week, and I wanted to try to kind of find the edges of it, find out where it was great, where it was lacking, and I definitely found a couple of things that I wish we could do. They're not quite ready, like margin, bottom, top, line work, the grouping of a series of boxes that need to sit into a specific space. But those are really minor by comparison with the ability to add this content and adjust and move these elements around. That's all super powerful stuff. Things that I wish I'd had in these programs like Figma and Sketch and whatever for a long time. Um, yeah, Bonzo, very cool. Now I got to redo my mockup. Yes and no. I would say that the real trick is nothing about the Figma files that you've had before are broken if you're not using auto layout. This is just a really great tool to have as you move forward, because it allows you to grab information from a client or from your team and insert it without worrying about the design falling apart. You can, do you have live data you can call in? You could use a Google Sheet to pull it in, or you could use Microsoft has a couple of different text generators for personalities that you could, like addresses and phone numbers and things that you could pull into this and really see like how does this design really work with imperfect data. Because I have to say that just because you have a running shoe, this could just be Brooks X19s and that's it. And it's like, well, okay, what happens when it's one line? What happens when it's X19 ghost fire ghost chili pepper fire fast treads? What happens when it's imperfect? And this is one of the real things that I pound the table on when it comes time to begin prototyping. How many times have you prototyped something and you've had like the word Joe as the username, you haven't really considered like people that have hyphenated names or long names? These are the types of things that we run into all the time, or restaurant names that happen to be long because maybe they're ethnic restaurant, or maybe there's legal restrictions. In Chicago, we have a lot of things that's like number 22 or number 14. Like there's all these numbers at the end because of the way the business was set up. Like I need you to take account for those sorts of edge cases, and I think this is really helpful in that particular realm. When I want to pull in information, I want to test with things that aren't just short 3-letter perfect data. I want to test with dirty data. I want to test with not dirty, messy data. I want to test with messy data to see how the design really works, and this makes it easier to do that. So bravo Figma. That's auto layout. Again, we'll have a more detailed tutorial coming up soon, probably rolling into our design systems talk, and we'll get that probably out later this month or in early January. But for New Pragmatic, I'm Chris Courtney. This has been Auto Layout with Figma, and I hope to see all of you again next Wednesday. Take care.